What's up guys, it's Chilly here. We just hit 5,000 subscribers. To celebrate, we'll do something a little bit different this time. If you watch any of my content, you'll know that I'm a big history nerd, and that means I love watching historically themed movies. So in this period of Age of Empires, today I'll be doing 3 quick movie reviews of popular movies set in the Middle Ages. I was originally going to do 10 movies, but editing is a ton of work, so we'll start with just 3 and see how it goes. If you want to see more content like this in the future, please let me know in the comments below. And before we get started, I just want to give a quick shout out. If you like what I make and want to support it, I've just set up a Ko-Fi account where you can help buy me a coffee. That being said, I'm not exactly going to be out in the streets if you don't donate, but any donations you do give will be invested right back into this channel, which means more content for you guys. Alright, enough groveling. Without further ado, let's get into it. Kingdom of Heaven. If you watch my videos, you've probably already seen this movie. It's one of the biggest production Crusader films out there, but it's also got its fair share of detractors. The theatrical release was a mess, with a ton of scenes left out that were crucial to understanding the plot. But thankfully, they since released the director's cut, which fills up all the holes and makes this movie, in my opinion, a classic.
God Wilson!
The story depicts Orlando Bloom, the least believable blacksmith in all of France, being brought to Crusade by Liam Neeson. Their journey thrusts them right into the heart of the spiritual, political, and physical crucible that is the Second Crusade. This is a story about faith and understanding what it means to be noble. The protagonist's internal struggle reminds me a lot of the meaning behind the word jihad, which aside from being the Muslim parallel to Crusade, also means to strive to find righteousness. In many ways, the movie was way ahead of its time. Keep in mind, this movie was released smack dab in the middle of post 9/11 War on Terror America, yet it depicts Muslim and Christian characters with their own complex approaches to faith and God that contrast with the fanatical factions on both sides of the conflict.
God alone determines the results of battles.
The results of battles are determined by God, but also by preparation, numbers, the absence of disease, and the availability of water.
Historical pedants will rant about how inaccurate this movie was. They're not wrong per se, there's definitely a lot of issues. Hollywood loves its flaming trebuchets and boiling oil, but I'm honestly impressed with how much this movie got right. The vibe of the medieval outreamer is immaculate, the costumes are pristine, and do a pretty damn good job of depicting the time period, especially considering that the audience wouldn't have cared if everyone just wore plate armor and fought with Zweihanders. I especially loved Liam Neeson's diverse entourage in the beginning of the movie, which featured a black Saracen that didn't speak English, a Germanic warrior that looks like he's a few centuries out of date, a Roman centurion from the 13th Legion, and wait, is that
Jamie fucking Lannister?
Too bad he got literally dented in and couldn't be a part of the rest of the film. Overall, this movie is amazing. 2 thumbs up, go watch the director's cut. This scene alone makes it one of the greatest medieval movies of all time. Silence. You probably haven't seen this movie before. It had a pretty muted response when it first came out. It's long, slow, and about a very niche topic.
Nobody expects the Japanese Inquisition.
That being said, I'm a little bit surprised at how little hype this movie got though. It's directed by Martin Scorsese, it's got a star-studded cast, all of whom were in their primes at the time of release. And it's about white people in Japan. We love movies about white people in Japan.
What the hell am I doing here?
The story depicts Andrew Garfield and Kylo Ren, 2 Portuguese monks stationed in Macau with wildly different opinions on what accents to inflect.
The Ferreira risked his life to spread our faith all over Japan.
Went on his knees like a dog.
They're on the search for their long-lost mentor, played by Liam Neeson, of course, who disappeared while proselytizing in Japan. I really appreciate period films that just assume you know your history. It allows us to get to the juicy stuff faster, and it gives me just the right amount of insecurity to compel me to crawl through a bunch of Wikipedia pages so I can start feeling superior to everyone again. Here's a quick backdrop. Japan just ended their longest civil war, the war where all of your notions of samurai and ninja come from. To get a leg up on their rivals, many Japanese daimyo welcomed European influence, including missionaries. After the war, Tokugawa was in power, and some disgruntled peasants in the south started a rebellion. Turns out many of them were Christians, so when the rebellion was squashed, Christianity was seen as the negative, unpatriotic, and foreign influence that was to blame. So began the period of Japanese isolationism, and for the Christians on the island, the period of Buddhist Inquisition. Aside from the top-notch cinematography, the number one thing that stood out to me about this film was how its setting lended beautifully to the movie's themes and deeper questions. What does it really mean to believe in God? How much of yourself are you willing to sacrifice for your faith? And what if keeping your faith meant that you had to sacrifice others? Don't take this the wrong way, but I found it really interesting watching depicting all the creative ways that the Inquisitors came up with to test the Christians to try to get them to renounce their faith. It shows a almost atheistic approach to spirituality that feels really modern despite the late medieval setting. You can really tell that these Inquisitors knew exactly what they were doing. They've studied and they know exactly what Christianity has to offer, whereas the priests that came here know barely anything about the land, the history, or even the language of the people that they're trying to convert. And while not entirely related, I also couldn't help but draw parallels to some of the ways that modern Western culture interacts with Asia. Whether it's dudes with Asian fetishes signing up to teach English, or enlightened would-be parents going out of their way to adopt Asian babies. Are these people really driven by a deep appreciation for the culture, or is it more just some sense of self-important hubris and not so subtle racism? Hopefully this movie can compel some much needed introspection. 2 thumbs up, watch this film, invite me to the Discord, I'll even watch it with you.
The price for your glory is their suffering.
The Northman. An amazing visual spectacle, especially if you're really high. Not as good if you're looking for anything resembling historical accuracy. This has got to be among the most artsy-fartsy ways to depict a Viking movie that I've ever seen, but I kind of appreciate it. It makes the film feel very modern, despite the story basically being a prototype of Hamlet. The movie oozes style, blurring the line between reality and mythology, which does a really spectacular job of immersing you into the mindset of what a vengeful Norse warrior was like. Needless to say, the cinematography is beautiful, and now that I think about it, this kind of reminds me of The Green Knight, another artsy-fartsy movie with amazing visuals in a medieval setting based on an old tale. Where's this trend coming from?
Is this really all there is?
What else ought there be?
The story follows the son of the Jarl, who lives a carefree life filled with pagan rituals led by a naked, screaming William Dafoe.
I live always without fear, for your fate is set and you cannot escape it.
But everything changed when the obviously villainously coded uncle attacked. Our boy's forced to flee and fend for himself, vowing to avenge his fallen father. I'm a few years late on this train, but William Dafoe has been killing it with these crazy grandpa roles. I feel like this is a character that only William Dafoe can play.
God damn.
Anyways, a few years later we come back to our boy, and he's lucky enough to grow up to look like an absolutely shredded Alexander Skarsgård. Yeah, it's basically the plot of Vinland Saga, but way sexier. Overall, the movie is pretty simple. It doesn't feel like it has a very pointed message, it's more just a visually stunning retelling of a classic tale. I could say some stuff about how obsession leads to ruin, or how an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, but I don't think the movie's too interested in all that. You're more meant to just inhabit the mind of this crazy psychopathic killer whose life mission is to secure a seat at Odin's table. And unfortunately, this lack of depth makes the film really drag in the latter half. I'll still give it 1 thumbs up. Again, amazing movie if you're really high. For fans of war movies though, the film does have a really badass long take depicting Ulfhednar berserkers raiding a Slavic village. That scene alone makes this movie worth at least checking out in my opinion. Alright, that's all I got for you guys today. What do you guys think? Have you guys seen these movies before? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe. That's all from me. Stay frosty, stay chilly.